Hey, hi everyone. Hey,
Guys, let me quickly do a quick introduction for everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for the first installation of what Multiplier hopes to do in the future. As far as we have done, we've gotten a good panelist from Francesco from Korn Ferry to give us some insights on how senior leadership hiring had occurred during the pre and post COVID periods. To Akansha, to share some insights on, what went well or what could be done better during COVID time hiring. How did people come to work? Where did they go to, and how did they onboard? And Nilesh from Monster would give us some insights, on the sort of roles and the functions that were hired and were most popular during that time. And lastly, Sagar from Multiplier to share some insights on, what is being seen at a regional level. All of this is, being moderated by Adrian from PeopleStrong. Over to you guys, Adrian.
Thank you, Amrit. Thank you, everyone, for coming onto this event, and thank you to all the 4 esteemed guests today. So I'd like to start off by asking everyone a question. You ever thought about the type of talents required to enable your business to succeed post-COVID-19? What are the skills, competencies, and experiences your business needs to thrive? Do you have a recruitment plan in place? Are you nurturing your future talent needs right now? And importantly, are you ready to hit go and execute your recruitment strategy when your business is ready to ramp up again? If you answered no to any of these questions, now is the time to consider your future talent needs. COVID-19 has accelerated changes in the way we work remotely, and using multiple technologies has become the norm. As economic conditions continue to evolve, having the right talent in place will be critical for businesses to maintain relevance. So today we'll be speaking with 4 of our guests here to help us guide on this disruptive journey on how you can look at your recruitment strategy and what are some of the best practices you can take away from. So to help us set the context, I would like to pose the first question across to Mr. Francesco Armino. Francesco, what happened during this COVID period that upended every recruiter around the world, and how does the impact differ across the different ASEAN markets that you are covering?
Yeah. So probably, the good question would be, what didn't happen? So basically, we have seen so many things happening in the last 12, 14 months. We would have never probably imagined, to be in a situation like this only 2 years ago. But here we are, and I have to say that in a way or another one, we have managed. So for sure, at the beginning, the situation, has changed the hiring needs, first of all. Second, it has changed, the way we recruit at whatever level. And third, I think there was an impact and a change at job market level. So let's say that the 3 things that I have just mentioned had an important impact on the industry in general. So if I start, from the first point, so from the change in the hiring needs, I can say that we have seen some sector growing and some other sectors shrinking. If we think, about sectors that were, mainly impacted, we can think about travel, we can think about tourism, we can think about hospitality. But on the other hand, we've seen some very important, very important growth in other sectors, such as shipping, delivery, last mile logistic, online, e-learning, e-commerce, and communication services in general. So it was absolutely explosive, as a growth. And of course, this has generated also shortage, if you want, of talents with specific technical skills, and this has created new opportunities for whoever is working in our industry. So this just to say that as most of the crises, bring opportunities and of course, challenges at the same time. So it's about, seeing the glass half full or half empty. Second, to face front the difficulties, we had, very, very quickly to understand how to change the way to recruit. We had to move from a very traditional, I would say, operational model into something that was mainly driven by new needs, like, for example, the social distancing norms. So we had to move from the face-to-face, very much, relationship-based model into something that was more transactional and more, virtual related. So in our lives, we have tools like Zoom or Teams or Blue Jeans or whatever, came in and gave us the chance, to keep doing our jobs pretty well. But of course, the technology tools are a great help, but in my opinion are not everything in whatever we do. But again, very, very good, to have the chance to proceed, move further despite, the inability to meet each other. And then last but not least, what we've seen, are the changes, in the market. I think, the job market was extremely healthy worldwide before the pandemic. And then we have seen, an impact that was, in some cases more local. It really depends by the industry. And in other cases, very, very, I would say, of global sites. Thanks to the remote working, I have to say that the job market that we are managing today is much more globalized, is much more international than before, and made us, understanding, gave us chance to understand that not necessarily a person has to be based next to us physically, geographically, to give a strong contribution to the business. Is somebody that can be eventually, 10,000 kilometers far away. Maybe will be a bit of a struggle regarding, the time zone. But, again, I think, despite the physical gap, we are probably, close each other more than before. So just to summarize, I would say that I see only good things, in what happened in the last 12 months. And I very much think that we will keep, our best practices, what we have learned going, also after, the end of the pandemic. So yeah, that's it.
And it's a good thing that, honestly, in a way, the pandemic happened right now. Because if you look back at the previous situation of SARS during 2003, we probably wouldn't be doing a webinar like this because technology, bandwidth, everything doesn't permit it. And of course, right now, with the ability to work remotely, that has also helped to salvage a lot of different jobs. In fact, even created a lot of different jobs as well. So my next question will be on this sense towards remote work. And I'd like to pose this across to Akansha. Given your daily interaction with candidates over at Robert Walters, what is the sense towards remote work? We understand all these are thrown to us without us really wanting it, but we still have to ensure that we are able to deal with it. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing coming from the candidates when you talk to them about remote work?
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. I think it's a very interesting question, especially so because we deal with so many candidates day in and day out. And I think all of us will agree that this pandemic has caused a lot of social and economic devastation, but it has also been a very large social experiment or workplace experiment, so to say, which has also highlighted the importance of workplace flexibility, I guess. So while that is something that most of the candidates are appreciating, there are a few challenges that unfortunately come with that. The biggest challenge we are seeing at the moment is candidates are finding it very difficult to unplug from work, right? There is no separation between the work and the personal life, which means that some candidates are burnt out and having to work longer hours than they did before. It also means that because of space constraints, there are a lot of distractions when you're working from home. You could probably have a dog outside your room or a baby in my case, for example, that I need to attend to. So there are obviously these distractions that come along with working from home. But one of the bigger challenges that we are seeing is the social connectivity. I think we are finding it very difficult. Candidates are finding it very difficult to communicate or collaborate with their employers, with the managers, finding it very difficult to have conversations that may need to be thought about, right? So these are few key challenges that we are seeing besides the tech challenges that do come across. Not all of us are tech savvy. This pandemic has meant that we've had to switch on to being tech savvy almost on an overnight basis. So these are the key challenges that candidates at all levels are seeing. When I think of my candidates who are also managers at certain levels, I feel that they are having a lot of trust issues that they are having to cope with. You cannot anymore manage a physical team, which means that there has to be some trust that you have to leave in your employees. They're not key parameters set in place always. So I think that is another challenge that most of my candidates were at the senior level team. And then there are another set of challenges that you see when candidates are joining another company, right? So the challenges that come with new candidates who are onboarding or getting hired. Do they feel very disengaged? They do not get a sense of the culture of the new organization, and sometimes they even wonder if the offer will go through because you haven't physically seen the person. So while there are very interesting things happening at the moment, most of the candidates that we speak to still feel that remote work is definitely here to stay, and they are overall very positive about the whole setup.
Thank you so much for that. And I do agree when it comes to remote work, especially when I first started, it was really hard to navigate. And also, you don't really know when to knock off. I remember the first few days, I had to work at my dining table and I was forced to knock off only when dinner arrived because they needed a table. And I'm very happy that Disney Plus only arrived yesterday. If they have came in a bit earlier, I think I'll be so distracted that I couldn't work at all. So thank you so much for helping us to understand more on those challenges. Next, I'd like to understand about where else can we find and identify some of this demand. As Francesco mentioned earlier on, there are obviously industry that has suffered, but there are also industries and pockets of demand which might even come unexpectedly. So I'd like to understand more from Nilesh. Nilesh, from COVID-19 obviously has created massive demand for some industry and not so much, in fact, negative demand in some others like hospitality. Based on monster.com data and what you are seeing right now, could you share what are the functions, levels, and industries that are still actively hiring for talents?
Yeah, sure, Adrian. I think what we have seen on Monster, especially since the beginning of this year, we've seen a big increase in jobs. We've seen a huge increase in the demand. Right now, we have over 75,000 jobs on Monster Singapore, and that number is only growing. So each day we see more jobs coming online, and these really range from right from a data scientist to someone who does the last mile delivery. So you have the whole spectrum of jobs on Monster right now. But what is interesting and what really stands out is the top industries which are hiring for these jobs. And if I were to really look at about 55% of all jobs are coming from the information technology and banking and financial services sector in the Singapore. So that is the biggest chunk of your jobs there. So most of the jobs that you see in the market are either connected to the IT industry or the banking and financial services industry in Singapore. Then you obviously have jobs from government. So there is also an increased demand for jobs from the government side. We also see increased jobs in the electronics production area. So I'm attributing this to maybe demand in devices, demand in chips, etc. Right? So all the manufacturing units are seeing a surge in demand. Consulting is seeing a big jump in Singapore. So we're seeing a lot of consulting jobs in Singapore market. We're also seeing a lot of IT-enabled services. Typically anything which is fueled by IT, anything which is driven by IT. So that's another sector which is seeing a lot of job growth. The other thing that really stands out, and which is if I were to look at pre-COVID and then look at post-COVID, what I also see is there's a huge demand for entry level and mid-career jobs. So we are really observing that most jobs now, and I probably would link it to the SG United initiative by the government, where they are incentivizing companies to hire and train freshers, and it that probably reflects in the job demand that I'm seeing right now. So typically entry level jobs are at an all-time high. So most companies are now looking to hire people at the entry to mid-career. So it's a great time for people who are passing out now from colleges. It's a great time for people who passed out in the last 1 year. There are a lot of jobs out there for them. So I think that's really something that stood out in terms of a data point that I would like to share. And talking about the category of jobs, I think the largest is still IT. So IT related, jobs are still the largest. And then, there are, requirements in specific engineering skills and specific production skills. And then there is obviously banking sector, which has been robust, as we see, whether you look at the global stock markets, indexes, banks, they're all pretty going strong during the COVID, and these industries have been resilient, right? So they haven't really broken down during the COVID era. So I think you can really see that coming out. And there's also a revival of construction. So just on the onset of COVID, construction had really taken a dip, and because people couldn't work, and because of the circuit breaker, people couldn't really go to these construction sites, and there was a dip in the demand. But now we're seeing the construction jobs also increasing. So yeah, interesting times, pre-COVID, post-COVID. But the demand is back, so that's the good part. So right now Singapore is showing a good demand for jobs. 75,000 is a good number, right? You're talking about a market like Singapore. 75K active jobs really speaks a lot.
And of course, with the notion of the ability to work remotely, that has also provided quite a number of opportunities that for some traditionally could not be involved because they might be stay-at-home mom, or they might have some caretaking issues that conflict with formal full-time employment. But of course, having said that, the fact is, if companies could look at remote workers, they not necessarily have to just look at them in Singapore. So, Saga, based on your understanding of the market, what are some of the hotspots that Singapore companies are heading to, and what are their functional specialization when they want to look at remote workers outside of Singapore?
Right. Thanks, Adrian, and hello, everyone. Anybody who has tried hiring in Singapore would know that it is very difficult to get talent here, right? Not just Singapore, any developed market is facing through a massive talent crunch, right? And getting EP is becoming difficult. That is not helping either, right? So you don't have talent, you're not letting the talent come in. And more so at the back of COVID, what you're saying is the acceptability of people to have a more global team, right? To give you some numbers, Nilesh talked about IT. He comes from an enterprise, so he calls it IT. We call it tech because we come from the cool tech industry, right? In Singapore itself, we require 100,000 engineers, but we only produce 10,000 engineers. That too at a price point of 10,000 SGD per month, right? Now you can compete with the Grabs and Gojeks of the world, or you can hire in markets like Vietnam, India, and build a stellar tech team, right? So let's talk about functions, right? The first function, and it's very critical to people here, is technology, right? A lot of tech talent, a lot of clients that we are talking to, we're seeing people building their tech team in Vietnam, right? Traditionally, the idea was, hey, India is the hub to go to create a tech team. You get a cost-effective talent. I think that's something where things are changing, and a lot of, in a lot of instances that we have seen, the cost in India is no more cheap. You sometimes for CTO level or VP of engineering level, people are paying more than they pay in Singapore, kind of like just to get access to the talent. So a lot of people are creating their tech teams in Vietnam, right? And the instances that Akansha talked about, a few of the instances that we heard is you delay your offer by a couple of days and the candidate is gone. So the demand is extremely high for this talent in a market like India, and hence we're seeing not just Singapore companies, even a lot of Indonesian companies that we're talking to are building their tech team in Vietnam, right? Be it front end, back end, Java, Node, all the skill set is available and the right market to kind of hire from, right? If we talk about marketing, kind of like break it down into different verticals of marketing. If we talk about content marketing, we're seeing a lot of demand coming from Philippines, right? Philippines talent, obviously they have the right English language skills, but at the same time, the right playfulness that is required for the content to be read by the audience. When you talk about performance marketing, we're seeing demand in countries like India and Australia, where the startup ecosystem is a bit more matured as compared to Southeast Asia. And these first generation companies, like Atlassian or your Byju's, or your Zomato have kind of like created this niche talent of digital marketers who have seen this journey once and are ready to scale the next company that they can be a part of, right? In terms of sales, we are seeing demand in Philippines, Malaysia, in Australia. And in terms of some niche talent like cybersecurity and AI, China and Australia are still leading by way, right? And just to like summarize it, right? Not just the developed markets, but even in developing markets like Indonesia, it's facing a massive talent crunch, right? One of the Korn Ferry reports, and Francesco would be interested in this. One of the Korn Ferry reports that I was reading says that by 2030, Indonesia will have a skill talent shortage of 15 million people. That's massive, right? Where will that talent come from? And not everybody would like to go and work in Indonesia. So that's where we're seeing the acceptability of building a global team is really going up.
And of course, in trying to build a global team, it also means that the way you hire, the way you screen, the way you acquire talent and potential talent would have to change a lot, because traditionally when you're hiring locally, you bring the person to the office, you try to impress them, you sit them at the table. But right now, it has really moved us to a more virtual-based or video-based one. So for companies new to this, and Francesco, I'd like to pose this to you. What are some of your observations in terms of best practices based on your interaction with your clients? And what are the initial things they should work on if the company is entirely new to this way of hiring?
Assuming that I work, in most of the traditional sectors, so mainly within the industrial space, which is the one that probably, is a bit behind in terms of digital transformation, if compared, to consumer or banking or technology in general. I have to say that the use of a new platform should bring, the companies in thinking about how to structure an hiring process. So basically, what is really going to change in terms of steps, to run all the interviews. This means the interview is going to be virtual, but who has to be necessarily part of the panel, when eventually, will be appropriate, to involve them, and how. Because what I've seen is that despite, again, the digital tools are giving us the chance to run these processes despite the pandemic, are creating a bit of confusion. Looks like, we are not, evaluating the time of the people as we used to do it before. So we are growing the number of interviews also because, not having chance to be face to face, the uncertainty is growing quite a lot. So in my opinion, in any case, it's good to standardize a process and work around it. Another important thing, in my opinion, is that it's not just necessary to determine, a fit, on the base of the technical background, on the experience. We don't have to forget that we are still talking about small, medium-sized, or big corporations. So there is also, in my opinion, attention that must be paid to cultural fit and values of people. So the fact that we are working from remote doesn't mean that we don't have to I would say be part of an organization, respect the core values, and behave in the way the company culture is imposing to us. So this is something that, in my opinion, should involve the ability in communication, how the people are open to collaboration, their organizational skills, how self-disciplined they are. So I would say that a more I would say profound assessment is needed. And talking about assessments, wherever there is a chance for whatever organization to use an assessment tool, I think would be good to use it at the end of the process, and of course go back to the candidates eventually to evaluate some points that are not clear. So basically crossing the results of the assessments together with a last interview to summarize and see if effectively we are comfortable with it. So this is what I can suggest. Let's say, so structure processes and not just going random because it's not going to bring us anywhere. This is a moment where for everyone, for an employer to have somebody on the base of a virtual interview is complicated, but we don't have also to forget that on the other side, there is also a candidate that maybe is in a comfort zone, that maybe is a passive candidate that was not looking for a new job and is going to take a risk because, he will not know who is the person that he or she is going to report into from a personal point of view, because is a person that he or she has met only in video. So more structure, give more confidence to people, candidates and employers, to make a move. So yeah, this is my suggestion.
So really much looking into the fundamentals and ensure that you have a great structure in place.
Absolutely.
So that things will be consistent, and of course everyone would have great clarity on what needs to be done.
Absolutely. I think so. So we don't have, again, to believe that technology and virtual interviews means, something, again, that is made random and can be organized, step by step. I think it's very, very important to keep, standard processes as was before, and just, be conscious that we are just changing the tool, but the fundamentals are not going to change.
Standardized process obviously would make a lot of sense and would be easy for a single company to do so. But from an agency recruitment front, Akansha, I'm imagining you'll be dealing with so many different clients with different technology platforms that you're just so overwhelmed with. But having said that, I'm very certain you would have come across certain technology platforms which are better than some others. So based on what you have observed, what are some of the technological platforms that companies are quickly adopting to support their current hiring processes?
Right. So like you rightly said, right, we work with a lot of clients, and which means that we have a lot of information about what clients are doing differently in terms of tech platforms, etc. And you'd be surprised to know that clients are investing a lot of money on enhancing their digital and technology infrastructure. In fact, Stanchart, I think they have promised to make the digital infrastructure 10 times of what it used to be until last year. So these are some things that companies are doing. Well, when we talk about tech infrastructure, there are the standard ones that we have to go to. I think the Zoom, the WebEx, etc., that we used in our day-to-day lives, which means that most of our staff are having to use that. But besides all those platforms, I think Cisco just launched a virtual collaboration room, which means that two rooms can now be collaborated into one, so that you don't feel left out. You feel that you're a part of a larger team in that sense. So these are some things that companies are doing on the tech front. But besides that, there are a lot of other things that clients are doing to kind of attract candidates. Tech is just obviously part of the wheel, but there are so many more things that comes along with it. So one of those things is candidate experience. I think which most of us don't want to forget, because candidate experience is the key. You're trying to get candidates who will resonate with the culture that is there in the organization at the moment. So you have to ensure that you're providing a very immersive experience to the candidate. So you can give digital videos, you can give a virtual walkthrough of your organization, how the office corridors look like, probably a video from the manager talking about the culture of the organization. When you come to talk about processes, there are some things that you can do to automate the processes as well. A lot of our clients are automating processes like reference checks, background checks, verification of candidates. These are things that are done so that that you have the information in hand, but at the same time you trust the system to be able to do the job for you. Because even more, I think, because you cannot meet the candidates now, you want to assure that you have as much data on the candidates as possible, right? So that is another thing that we are seeing. Another thing that we would encourage, or rather a lot of our clients are doing, is to enhance social connectivity within the team. So for example, one of the companies called GitLab, they just have a random room design for them, which means that you can have your water cooler movements on Google Hangout. So if you feel that you want to talk to somebody from the organization, you can just log in and then have a casual conversation with them. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, they have launched a head of remote onboarding, which means that candidates get a very good experience when they join the company. And you don't need to, the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to necessarily create these positions, but you can probably have cultural ambassadors within the team
to kind of help ensure that the new hires or recruits feel the vibe of the organization, so to say.
And back to the job posting that Nilesh, you have been seeing since the start of the pandemic. You mentioned there's a huge jump in various sectors, industries, and of course, a lot more positions open up to fresh graduates as well. But given that we are in a very unique situation, we're in a pandemic year, how has this affected companies in aligning their job posting? Is there an uptrend in keywords like remote in job posting, and how many more are you seeing?
So yeah, great question actually, Adrian. So since the onset of COVID, we really saw, so the moment COVID happened, a lot of companies which were hiring typically, were confused and they halted their hiring. They kind of froze their hiring. They didn't really know how to navigate. I think this took like a quarter or about 4 or 5 months for them to really figure out, that remote is the way forward or work from home is the way forward, right? And since then, right, we really saw increased job postings for work from home or remote positions, right? So these are jobs which clearly specify that this job is going to be a work from home job or a remote job, so you really don't have to come to work. And this is a big shift. I mean, we never used to see those kind of jobs pre-COVID. So what we saw post-COVID was really this whole shift of companies saying that, hey, we could have people working from home permanently, probably, right? So and let's advertise for those jobs. And so we saw that. Right now, if you ask me the numbers, about 9% of the jobs on Monster are work from home jobs, so or remote jobs, as you may call it, right? So which is a big number. I mean, 9% of all jobs right now in the market are for work from home positions, and that's a big shift that we're seeing. One great insight that we've observed, and that's something that I would like to share with you and the audience, is that the rate of applications for these jobs that we are observing, right? So all the work from home or remote jobs are getting 30% higher applications as opposed to jobs in offices. So what I'm saying is, this probably definitely talks about a trend where even job seekers are comfortable to apply for jobs which typically let you work from home. And so is the case with employers, because they are posting those jobs. So this is a big mindset shift that we're talking about. I mean, pre-COVID, working from home was as good as probably once in a couple of months is when you would do that and move that. I mean, talking about even a company like Monster, it's been a year that we've been only working from home, and it's like 100% work from home for over a year now, and that's a big shift. We never did that before COVID. So it was a mindset shift for us to really understand that this is possible, this can be done. And how do you then measure your productivity? It can no longer be hours that I can measure productivity in, because like Akansha was saying earlier, right, that it's already gone haywire at times, right? You're working all the time, you're at home, and it's so difficult to unplug. It's so difficult to so hours really don't is not the right metric anymore to measure productivity. How else can you do it? So we also went through that transition, and I'm sure that a lot of companies have kind of gone through that transition and changed a lot of metrics when it comes to measuring performance and productivity of employees, whether they're working from home or from office. Yeah. So
You mentioned Monster has gone 100% remote. So on behalf of candidates who are looking for jobs out there, is Monster hiring right now?
we are hiring, not in Singapore, but in certain markets in Southeast Asia. So we are.
It doesn't matter since it's going to be remote.
Yeah, we are hiring though. Yeah.
And I would definitely second the 30% in terms of uptake. I definitely would be one of those 30% candidates who would much prefer a remote job. Having been working remotely over the past 1 year, I am very domesticated right now. Trying to get me out for a coffee is almost impossible. I would much rather do a virtual one. So I would definitely understand why there will be such a trend towards remote job. But of course, as we mentioned earlier on, the ability to work remote here may also pose to be a kind of threat because companies can indeed look outside of Singapore. And for candidates who are stuck in Singapore, i.e. the Singaporeans, the PR, Saga, based on your observations of offshoring trends, if you are a job seeker today and knowing what you know, what are some of the reskilling and upskilling advice you would give to yourself?
Right. I think it's a very interesting question. One of the questions that we always get asked is, hey, if you kind of like build this infrastructure out and people are able to hire remotely, what will happen to the jobs in Singapore, right? The way we think about the entire problem, we think about it in terms of Rubik's Cube. We are saying, hey, if the Singaporean jobs are going to India, some other jobs are coming to Singapore as well, right? Obviously you have Singaporeans who are good in accounting, good in finance, good in law. They can work for German companies or Japanese companies and whatnot, right? But to come to the specific question of upskilling, right, there are two areas where we are at least seeing people who are really working on these two areas, right? One is, let's kind of like talk about the hard skills, right? So the real talent gap that exists in the market is in two areas, which is marketing and tech, right? But gone are the days where, when you studied computer science engineering in your bachelor's and you did computer engineering for rest of your lives, right? Today, with the advancement of startups like Lambda School and everything, what has happened is, you can do a career switch in the middle of your career. Let's say you're a mid-career professional, 35-year, 40-year-old professional. You are doing accounting all your life, but you suddenly realize and you wake up to a reality where, people are looking for tech jobs. So this is now a 1-year investment where you can go for one of these courses, learn how to code, whether it is back end, front end, and get back in the job market, right? Similarly, for marketing, there are a lot of startups which are coming, which are preparing people for career switch, right? Also, not just people who are in the workforce. One of the idea that really excites us at Multiplier and why we started Multiplier at the first place was, bringing homemakers to the workforce, right? A lot of traditional kind of like countries in this part of the world, as well as India, traditionally what has happened is, either one of the gender has taken a backseat, whether it's the husband or wife has taken a backseat and kind of like acted as a homemaker. Now, when you're working remotely and you don't really need to be a part of the office and you are able to devote 70% of your time, you can still kind of like be a part of the workforce, right? So that's something that we are seeing as well, where women in these developing countries are doing the coding courses and are able to work remotely and support companies remotely, right? So that's one part of it. The second part of it, which I think really requires a lot of work, is more on the soft skill side. So, unlike West, what we lack here is the ability to sell yourself, right? A lot of talented individuals here kind of like takes a backseat just because they're not able to present their skills in a format or sell themselves in a format. So that's one area where we are seeing a lot of people working as well, a lot of startups coming as well, companies like Hark Center and everything, where you work on your presentation, you work on your communication so that you are not left behind because of some language skill. So at least these are the two areas that we are saying people are working to get back to workforce, whether it's for the first time or for mid-career professionals.
I agree with you 100% on most of our inability to market ourselves. I was previously in the outplacement space, and many unemployed job seekers, the way I look at them, their key problem is actually a marketing problem. They're unable to sell themselves. They're unable to do a good presentation of what is the skill sets. Essentially, I guess it is very much down to our Asian roots, where we are told to be very humble since we're young. But unfortunately, in trying to find a job, being humble does not really help. So learning how to market yourself, how to be an established thought leader, or be seen as a thought leader, all this would be very useful. And I can really back this up. In my current role at PeopleStrong, I didn't get it because I applied for it. I got it because I have been writing and generating a lot of content on my own blog, and one thing led to another, and that's how I have been with PeopleStrong, and I've been with them for 2 years. So really, the marketing skill sets, I believe, is something that cuts across for many candidates to really look into. And if you are a professional in any space, I guess going into a professional networking platform would be the place to start. And right now, based on what I understand, people are even going onto Clubhouse to market about themselves, to share about what they can do. And this really bring up a lot of different aspects and avenues for people to present themselves. So thank you so much for helping us to learn that. And I would like to next just remind audiences, if you have any question, please key into the Q&A box so that we can start addressing them. So I just like to move over to the question and Q&A that we already have. I'd like to pose a few questions across to our panelists here. If you are comfortable to address them, just chime in so that we can understand your take on some of the things that our attendees are seeking clarifications on. So the first thing that perhaps I'd like to touch on would be from Jaspo, one of the attendees called Jaspo. And Jaspo is asking, what's the relationship between remote working and compensation? So with remote working from the organization standpoint, are they willing to increase compensation offered to applicants? I guess some may say increase, perhaps from an allowance standpoint, because you'll be spending more energy, more utilities at home. But for some others, based on what I read, especially in US, Facebook initially actually proposed to lower the salary of their engineers because they no longer will have to pay the high cost of living in San Francisco. I wasn't able to verify that, but it does seems to make certain sense from a company perspective. What is your take on the relationship between remote work and compensation? Anyone that is keen to give your take on this?
Hi, that's a very interesting question, Jasper, if I got the name right. So at this moment, we are not foreseeing that there is a relationship between remote working and salaries. I wish there were. I wish salaries were going up. But unfortunately, there are a lot of other factors that come into play. The global economic scenario, I think, which will play a big part. Although working from home remotely means that a lot of organizations are now moving to a hybrid model, wherein they are moving to smaller spaces as well. So there definitely is a lot of cost saving when you look at the new model. But obviously, not all businesses are doing well. There are a lot of overheads, etc., that go into the picture as well. So no, I mean, none of the clients that we spoke to in the salary survey as well that we did last year, 2020, none of them said that the salaries were going to go up as a result of remote working.
Thank you for that. And anyone else like to chime onto it?
Right. So, Adrian, if I can just quickly address as well. So, one of the things that we are seeing is parity. No, probably a couple of years later, you might see, but not today. But how clients are looking at it in terms of cost benefit is a more win-win situation, right? So, if they were to pay a certain amount of money to that candidate, if they were to bring him in Singapore, her in Singapore, they can now reduce that amount of salary, but it's still higher than what the candidate will eventually get in their home country. So the person is also having an upside as well as the company is also having an upside. So that way there's no parity, yes, to Akansha's point, but there's definitely win-win for both the parties involved.
Got it. So do take note, there's going to be a win-win for both parties involved. And moving on to our next question, and this is specifically directed to Francesco. How do personality assessment play a part for hiring roles today in this day and age? So this is directed specifically to you from one of your fans. So hopefully you could share your take on this.
Look, I think is definitely important. Now, I would say more than ever, is very, very important to have a very, very strong personality. We are, called to work remotely, so our personality has to be stronger. Our ability in making, decision has to be stronger. Our ability in managing, conflicts, also, by distance and purely online has to be bigger. So I think the importance of the online assessments is definitely crucial in this moment. But what I like, to share with the clients, because the assessments are always a part of our processes, is that whatever is the outcome is never something that is written on the stone. So we always need to have a second chat with the candidates after that to verify the outcome of the assessments itself. But to go back to the previous question, I have to say that yeah, in my opinion, is very important. Is playing a pivotal role, and the time spent to assess whatever is not strictly technical, which is something more related to our soft skills, has to be increased definitely.
And the next question that I'd like to ask would I perhaps want to get Nilesh to your take on this, which essentially, okay, is coming from an anonymous attendee. You mentioned earlier on that Monster actually, of course, has everyone doing remotely. And of course, that also lead to management of performance, engagement, all done in a very different manner. So based on your observation on what your company is doing, how could companies monitor both employee engagement, and productivity effectively with remote working?
That's a great question, actually, Adrian. And so we obviously went through that transition, right? So when the moment we realized that we are moving on to people operating remotely and working from their homes, we kind of went back and kind of looked at our measurement metrics. Fortunately for us, most of the jobs that we have in the Southeast Asian region are sales or customer success jobs. So these metrics are easier to measure as opposed to more complex jobs. But from a standpoint of really understanding what the eventual delivery of a job is, right? And it could be a job role, and what is the eventual delivery that particular job role is supposed to do. We kind of worked out the metrics and what are the acceptable bounds that we should or a person should deliver, and kind of working along with those metrics is what we've done. And so there hasn't been a huge transformation in the overall measurement metrics, but we have kind of now gone back to looking at productivity and delivery tied into a particular job role, and that's what is driving these measurements. So that's where it is right now.
And to add on, I believe companies could also look into investing in some form of platforms or tools to help them manage performance better. Traditionally, it has always been done in a pen and paper manner. Right now, a lot of OKR platforms, performance management platform, PeopleStrong has one, which we are using and getting a lot of traction in trying to digitize the way people do performance management as well as employee engagement. So the next question would go to, perhaps I'd like Akansha to handle this. It's coming from Sahil. The question is basically, how are you handling the dropouts when it comes to hiring techies post-COVID-19, because recruitment market is open and pacing up now? I would like to reframe this question. I think it's not just unique to techies. For certain industries, definitely there are going to be a lot more demand than supply of candidates. And when it comes to handling dropout, I think that is already too late. In fact, we should look at how should we prevent dropouts from happening. So based on your observation and your understanding, what can companies do to prevent the number of dropouts, especially in the current scenario?
Very relevant again, Adrian. I think one thing that we are seeing, interestingly, is the hiring processes from clients are becoming much longer, right? So, for example, if clients took 3 months to close a head of finance position, hypothetically, now it would take, for example, 4 to 5 months to actually close the process, and that is because obviously there is a trust factor that comes into play, which means that that will lead into dropouts, right? So what we are suggesting clients or candidates to do is invest a lot into candidate engagement and act fast, right? So don't sit on the candidates if you like the candidates. There will be not 100% plug and play that you can find. So if you feel that the candidates tick most of the boxes, then just go ahead and take the call and hire them. Because it's becoming even more so difficult to get the best candidates out there to come and join your organization. It's not like previous days where they can come in and meet you and get a sense of your culture. So just act fast is what my suggestion would be.
Yes, I do think the act fast part is something companies would have to really get acquainted with. My cousin personally went through 5 rounds. I wouldn't tell you that the company is Facebook, but on the 5th round, he was told that he's too experienced, which of course in his head is like, what the hell? Why can't you tell me this earlier? And of course, the job didn't happen, and it wasted 5 months of his time. You probably could do it and get away with it if you are a Fortune 500 companies, a hot shot startup before COVID. But I think in today's context, you probably can't get away with it, even if you are Tesla. Maybe you can with Tesla. I don't know. Perhaps if they give you enough Bitcoin, you'll be willing to stay and do whatever you need to. So something for most companies to think about, trying to accelerate the way you hire.
Yeah.
And the next question, and potentially the last question, given the limited time that we have, I'd like to pose it across to Saga. And this question comes from Kostaf, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Based on your observation, has COVID impacted the ability of foreign students to find work in Singapore and other ASEAN countries?
Right. So I think, the answer lies in, again, dividing into different segments, right? If you think about traditional service industry, which is consulting, banking, so yes, there was a period of time immediately following lockdown where it was absolutely difficult to get EPs. And we have also faced the same situation. But even for those industries, situations are improving now. I think if you kind of like club it into ASEAN group, it becomes very difficult to. It's when we say ASEAN is one block, but in reality these are 10 different countries with 10 different regulations. So particularly to Singapore, yes, there was some issues with things around service industry. But if you talk about marketing, if you talk about technology, again coming back to these 2 sectors, which is really hot, and there's a massive talent deficit. No. People were still okay to get foreigners in, irrespective of what your experience or what your number of years experience are, right? The other thing that we're saying it in non-Singapore countries is a massive influx of foreign talent. So a lot of Singapore talent, whether it is bachelor's talent from NUSNTU or MBA talent from INSEAD, now go and work in Indonesia for the service industry, for McKinsey and BCS of the world. So in general, no. Obviously, there was a window where it was very difficult to do that, but now even in Singapore, we are seeing rules kind of like ease in, and people are able to get jobs no matter what your nationality or your number of years of experience are.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the excellent questions posed to us by the attendees. There's still quite a number of questions, but unfortunately we are running out of time. But we hope we are able to address most of them. And thank you so much to all the esteemed guests and panelists in making today possible. I'd like to end off by extending my greater thanks to all the attendees for making time today to attend this 45-minute session. And we're going to pass this over back to Amrit. Amrit, over to you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. As Adrian suggested, maybe next time we'll return on Clubhouse. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Very much. Thank you.